Arlington, Texas, the 29th of April, the final day of the 2018 NFL Draft. More specifically, round 5, and even more specifically, pick 141. The Seahawks run the clock, and in the first they picked up Rashad Penny, and future stars like Lamar Jackson, Micah Fitzpatrick and Josh Allen have come and gone. This is the 5th round, the back end, day 3, the place where the only players that survive the onslaught of pre-season cuts live and die by their grit. And it just so happens that this year's poster child for this exact quality is about to hear his name called ahead of this excited 12-man crowd.
The Seattle Seahawks select Shaquem Griffin.
All right.
Shaquem Griffin, he was a linebacker out of Central Florida. His brother and college teammate Shaquille Griffin was actually drafted 1 year ahead of him in the 3rd, but this was Shaquem's day. With 3 interceptions, 18.5 sacks, Shaquem only really started to see the field in his sophomore year after redshirting. After this, he racked up near 200 tackles and was named the Peach Bowl MVP. And in 2016, he also won the American Athletic Conference Defensive Player of the Year. He also ran a 4.38 40-yard dash in the combine, which was the fastest by a linebacker of all time. He was pretty solid. But there was another notable thing about Shaquem Griffin which I should probably mention. Oh yeah, he had one hand. Born 1 minute after his brother in St. Petersburg, Florida, Shaquem was born with a condition which differed him from his twin. It was a condition called amniotic band syndrome, essentially a condition which affects roughly 5 in every 10,000 births. It's a condition in which the umbilical cord wraps around your wrists and restricts blood flow and circulation. Because of this, it stunted the growth and development in his hand and maintained his fingers, except they had not developed beyond tissue. This caused so much pain that when he was 4, he even tried to self-amputate his fingers. Growing older, Shaquille turned down several top-tier college scholarships until he was offered the opportunity to play alongside his brother in UCF. He excelled immediately, while Shaquem needed a little bit more time to develop. It was 2016 which Shaquem broke out. And as I mentioned before, this was the year that Shaquem truly came into his own. 20 tackles for a loss, 11.5 sacks, an interception, 2 fumbles, 7 passes deflected. He was eventually becoming a force to be reckoned with. And his next year was more of the same. 13.5 tackles for a loss, 7 sacks, a pick, another 2 fumbles, and a defensive interception. That might be touchdown, I'll check my script again. Shaquem helped lead the UCF to an undefeated season. Shaquem was that guy, and despite with one hand, he proved that he could ball out under the right circumstances, and what better a circumstance and environment than to be alongside his brother yet again. So this takes us back to that late April 2018 weekend. Shaquem's name's called, Seattle take a punt on reuniting the brothers, and it kind of works. I mean, listen, a late round pick is a late round pick, and no matter the story behind it, and Shaquem's happy ending wasn't supposed to be making it into the Hall of Fame, countless Pro Bowls and Team Decade honours. It was surviving in the NFL. It was helping his brother reach the Pro Bowl. There's a reason I've been mentioning Shaquille so often when in parallel to Shaquem. That's because their career pretty much works in tandem together, really. That short period of the brothers being reunited in the pros produced the best 3-year stretch out of Shaquille's career. So maybe Shaquem's impact was felt more so than just the initial sideways glance at his numbers. In the NFL, Shaquem wasn't a superstar, but nor was he expected to be. The man made the league and got drafted and had one hand. No less, he stuck around in the league for 3 years for 46 games. He recorded a playoff sack too. He had that grit, that inner strength, and that determination that you look for in those later rounds. As Shaquem stated in the 2018 Players Tribune letter to GMs, no one was ever going to tell me that I couldn't make it, and nobody was ever going to tell me that I couldn't be great. But what about players before Shaquem? What about players even before Shaquem was born? What about Tom Dempsey?
When we first got started, we had obviously a zillion guys come. Everybody from the parking lot came in so they could kick. So one day they said, all right, we got this other guy coming up to kick. And I saw Tom, and he's got the deformed ham and the deformed foot. Well, he started popping those dudes too. Boom, boom, boom. I mean, they were just flying. I said, that sucker can kick that ball farther than you ever seen anybody in your whole life.
Tom Dempsey was born in January 1947 with no toes on his right foot, nor fingers on his right hand. Despite this, he sought out an athletic career in which he could turn his biggest perceived weakness into his greatest legacy-defining asset. He moved out west to California for his college years. He attended Palomar, a community college in San Marcos, San Diego County. Even to this day, he was one of the only 2 NFL alumni from that college, at least if we're considering direct routes from Palomar into the league. The second fun fact, Jets and Chiefs returner Salim Hakeem, who played from 2013 to 2015. Fun fact, both players went undrafted. Dempsey actually began his career somewhere that was very familiar with a contract with San Diego with the Chargers. He saw no action with the Chargers, however, but he reached no further than the practice squad. It would only be a handful of years which followed that he cemented his kick greatness as a kicker, no, a football player. I say football player because Dempsey hated to be called just a kicker. Instead, he would say, I'm a football player that kicks, and kick he did. As the league began to evolve into the soccer-style approach popularised by Pete Gogliak in the 1960s and 70s, Dempsey maintained the straight-toe kicking style which had been to tradition and was initially the standard. The style complemented his condition in thanks to his custom-made cleats which had no toe box. Essentially, the shoes were flattened around the toe with an enlarged club-like surface, which is probably the best way of describing it, around the tip. The shoe was developed in 1968 during his stint with the Chargers. Before this, he actually used to kick barefoot. The innovation wasn't without controversy, though. To some, Dempsey's foot was seen as, and essentially looked at, as acting like a hammer. They saw it as a cheat sheet, essentially, to slink these extra long kicks with more ease than his competition. These assumptions were helped, unfortunately, by a 55-yard bomb in his first year and a subsequent Pro Bowl nod. They were even more substantiated in 1970, when he broke the NFL record at the time with a previously unfathomable 63-yard game winner, which is just insane. I've wrote he was at his own 63-yard line, but that doesn't sound right. It was against Detroit. The game ended 19-17 in favour of New Orleans, one of the 2 wins that the Saints had that year. This kick shattered the previous record of 56 yards held by Bert Retchich. I can't pronounce the name properly. It's called Retchichar in 1953. Anyway, he was a Saints legend. 4 years after the kick, the decision was made to move the goalposts to the back of the end zone rather than the front. This was a decision directly in line with deterring teams from making these ridiculous extra long kicks like that one that Dempsey made on November the 8th, 1970. Further in response to Tom Dempsey's impact, the rules actually evolved around his style. The implementation of the Tom Dempsey rule actually stated that any shoe that is worn by a player with an artificial limb on his kicking leg must have a kicking surface that conforms to that of the amount of a normal kicking shoe. Essentially, it was unfortunately at the time and the view of quite a lot of people, even considering his peers, the media, the fans, that Tom Dempsey's shoe, a direct adjustment to his disability, was actually a hindrance to the sport overall. But actually, here's the interesting thing. In a study made by ESPN Sports Science years later, it was found that his modified $200 shoe didn't give him an advantage. In fact, the smaller contact area was seen to potentially increase the margin of error rather than reduce it, thus adding, greater complications to the already pinpoint precision required to kick NFL balls. In short, that means that popping off kicks like this were nothing but utter talent.
I don't believe this. It's good! I don't believe it! The field goal attempt was good from 63 yards away! It's incredible! Tulane Stadium has gone wild! A 63-yard field goal!
And disability in the NFL, no matter how little or often spoken, has maintained a promising shadow over the league since Dempsey. I mean, you've got Terry Bradshaw's ADHD, you've got dyslexia in Mark Schlereth, Tim Tebow, and even Rex Ryan. You've got Frank Gore, who played 16 years as a running back in the league with dyslexia. I mean, then you've got Jason Pierre-Paul, who lost a significant portion of his right hand, including his index finger, in a 2015 fireworks accident. But despite this, JPP continued to rack up an impressive career. He racked up over 50 sacks, a Pro Bowl, and over 250 tackles after the incident. Or, speaking about fingers, I mean, many of us know about Ronnie Lott's Pinckney, but what about eyes?
Testaverde brought the Jets from behind to win 3 times in the fourth quarter, and his ratio of 29 touchdown passes to 7 interceptions was the 4th best in NFL history.
In 1988, the Bucs were 5-11, a heavily disappointing season made even more disappointing by the poor quarterback play of their number 1 overall selection in 1987, Vinny Testaverde. Vinny threw for 35 interceptions in 15 games. On an October afternoon against the Vikings, which Bucs fans were happy to forget, Vinny actually threw 6 picks against a single touchdown, and it was becoming very clear to the fans worldwide who Vinny Testaverde was. I mean, it was obvious. Everybody saw him as a laughing stock. He was the punching bag of the league. And very famously, a billboard was taken out depicting Vinny against a blue background reading, "Vinny thinks this is orange." I mean, he was colourblind, and in a 1990 interview with Terry Bradshaw, he even admitted this. His career after the disappointing start became that of a journeyman, really. He had a stint with Bill Belichick's Browns where he actually started in favour of Bernie Kosar. He even had a Pro Bowl nod as the Ravens' first starting quarterback when the Browns moved to the Ravens. Yes, Vinny Testaverde was the first Ravens quarterback, fun fact. He also had an up and down stretch with the Jets. I mean, Vinny played and played and played, and his game improved over time, and by the time he was done, he'd actually won a pair of playoff games and reached 2 Pro Bowls. The former laughingstock actually outlasted his entire draft class, and at the age of 44 in 2007, he finally hung up the cleats, going from the league-wide punching bag to a respected veteran, 2-time Pro Bowler, and with 233 games under his belt. But then you've also got Bob Greasy, who in my opinion is one of the most underrated careers in NFL history. People don't really talk about Bob Greasy anymore. In my opinion, this is because his legend is overshadowed by who came after him, but we can't forget that the close proximity of these 2 elite careers meant that the Dolphins maintained generally Hall of Fame quarterback play from the years of 1967 to 1999, which is just crazy to me. That's like Packers level of luck with quarterbacks, you know what I mean? The biggest difference between Greasy and Marino, though, Greasy actually won a ring, but he didn't just win 1 ring, he won 2 rings. And another pretty big difference, which was, I'd say, a massive difference, is Greasy was legally blind. Beyond his legacy as Miami's 3 consecutive appearance, 2-time Super Bowl winning stretch quarterback between the 60s and 70s, Bob Greasy is known for perhaps one defining feature: his glasses. It wasn't actually until 1977 when he started wearing them, after learning that he'd become legally blind in his right eye. Of course, the full use of both eyes is pretty important in the NFL, no less for a quarterback. I mean, you need depth perception, that's very crucial, I would argue. I mean, this was long before Rodrigo Blankenship became iconic for his goggles. This was eras ago. I mean, and in 1977, Bob Greasy defined his legacy. And I've just realised this, actually, bringing up Rodrigo Blankenship's goggles, Eric Dickerson. It was still before Eric Dickerson, so the point stands. And the year that he wore these goggles for the first time was actually, without a doubt, the best statistical year of his Hall of Fame career. He threw for 22 touchdowns over 13 picks, and 10 of his 14 games he'd won. He actually finished second in MVP voting, only just behind Walter Payton in Walter Payton's best statistical year. But all in fairness, really, who's beating Walter Payton in 1977? I mean, I'm going to see if I can find some sort of highlights, but I'm sure if you're watching them, maybe your jaw's on the floor.
Team.
Peyton, a tough guy, Tom. He's as tough as any running back in the league.
He's got the quickness, he's got the lateral movement. He's just a complete football player with a great attitude, and he's the kind of guy you want on your team because he's going to produce.
Second down, 7, a delay to Peyton. 30, 35, look out! He may go to the 40, to the 30. Walter Payton down to the 20. Walt Williams is trying to get him, and he's got him just inside the 5-yard line. Walter Payton.
I mean, and back to the modern NFL, alongside Shaquem Griffin, the examples are still there. I mean, you've got the legally deaf fullback, Derek Coleman, who actually played 5 seasons whilst reading lips. Or you've got Joe Barksdale, who learned later in his life that he was actually autistic. Or, I mean, quite famously, Teddy Bruschi. I'm terrible at pronouncing names, but I'm sure that's it. Who actually suffered a stroke 9 days after his 3rd Super Bowl, and he went on to play and predominantly start for another 4 seasons. But this is the thing, I love the topic of disability in the NFL, and I think it's very underrated and not spoke about very often. I mean, in itself, the sport is a conglomerate of thousands of incredible stories going on at the same time, and difficulty of playing in the NFL is immense. I mean, the likes of Dwayne Johnson and Terry Crews couldn't even make it. It's a massive uphill battle, and when you have another hurdle in the way, like one hand, like being deaf, like being colourblind, or having half of a foot, I just think that's insane. I mean, look at Dwayne Johnson and Terry Crews here. These guys, they didn't make it. There's something fascinating about those guys that make it despite the extra hurdle. There's not only this, but to cement their legacy or change the league as a whole, how they do it. I mean, to be remembered above the thousands of other names which make the league too, but just stay in a practice squad or don't actually cement a legacy. The history of the NFL is defined by thousands of these legacies. I mean, this is why the Hall of Fame is such a big thing. All of these legacies are interlocking with each other and affecting one another. It's all about legacy, and that Tom Dempsey kick, the 64-yarder, that record wouldn't actually be broken for another 40 years. That kick survived the greats like Adam Vinatieri, Morton and Gary Anderson. Bob Greasy, immortalised, was with a bust in Canton. Tom Brady actually won MVP at 30 years old in Vinny Testaverde's final season. I mean, try to put those ages alongside each other. That's how long Vinny Testaverde lasted. Or you got John Elway, who won MVP at 27 when Vinny Testaverde was a rookie. I mean, that's how long he played. Disability in the NFL is defined by these legacies, defined by the legacies on and off the field. As guys like Shaquem Griffin do nothing but inspire generations more. As Shaquem Griffin states in his 2018 Players Tribune letter to GMs, I mentioned it before and I'll say it again. Nobody was ever going to tell me that I didn't belong on a football field, and nobody was ever going to tell me that I couldn't be great.
So I didn't listen. Don't move until I move. Move until I move.
53rd pick, and the last pick is...
They didn't call my name. Told me it was over. But I showed them it wasn't. And now I'm here with a lot of fans in the NFL cheering me on. And I can hear them all.